Hello, hello. I'm Andrew with Art House Garage, and today I'm going to talk about a film and talk to a few filmmakers that played at the recent Bentonville Film Festival. The film is called The Seven Faces of Jane, and it's a really unusual film, sort of an experiment formally, and it uses what's called the exquisite corpse model, which is something that can be done with poetry or film or any number of art forms, but basically you take a whole project, split it into parts, and different artists complete the different portions of the film in this case. And so The Seven Faces of Jane, it's produced by Roman Coppola and it stars Gillian Jacobs, and it's got 7 or 8 portions, and it has a number of different directors, including Gillian Jacobs directed some of it, as well as Julian Acosta and Boma Iluma, who I'm going to speak with in just a moment. Also, Zan Cassavetes, Gia Coppola, Ryan Heffington, Kin Jeong, and Alex Tacox. This film is really interesting. So each section has a very different visual style and kind of thematic ties throughout, but otherwise independent of one another. The story is that Jane, played by Gillian Jacobs, drops her daughter off at summer camp and then has this week where she's alone, and she kind of goes on this road trip alone to find herself in a way, and has all these different experiences throughout the film. Each director was given a little bit of a starting point, which I ask these 2 directors about in just a moment. So without further ado, here is my interview about The Seven Faces of Jane with Boma Iluma and Julian Acosta.
Tell me where it is.
Where's what?
All right, that's it. I've had enough.
Tie her up and put her in the boot.
Time to go, see. You know who.
Wait a second. Who are you?
I'm Jane. Who are you?
Okay, yes, this all makes sense now. This is the Jane who works here, and this is the Jane that you're looking for.
No, I am not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are!
I'm here with Boma Iluma and Julian Acosta, 2 of the directors of The Seven Faces of Jane. Thank you both so much for being here. It's a really fascinating film. It has such an unusual structure, so it's feature length but divided into 7 or 8 parts with a different director creating each portion of the film. So as I understand it, you were given a little bit of direction for a starting point, but I'm curious about what exactly that was. So Boma, let's start with you. Your segment of the film is called Teo, and it takes place on this
Tayo.
Tayo, sorry, apologize.
Yeah.
It takes place on this beautiful beach, and it has, features this musician who has history with Jane. What direction were you given to start with, and how did you decide where to take the story?
Yeah, thank you for having us. The we had to play. We played a game, Exquisite Corpse, and in the game you pull cards, and it kind of gives you a sense of the story order. So I think I pulled the card for the second part of the second short that's going to be second part of the journey, and then that was followed by I pulled another card that said Jane's encounter with a stranger,
Okay.
and then interpret that to be Tayo,
Okay.
or
Wow.
Oliver, who is now Tayo.
Did it specify the setting or any of the other aspects of it?
Yes, and I also pulled a card for the beach.
The beach. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I wondered. I thought that I remembered hearing that the setting was part of that. Well, all the segments have their own kind of visual style, and in Tayo in particular, it really stands out because it has different quality of film and different aspect ratio. How did you decide how this would look visually, and do you think you approached it any differently because it's part of this kind of larger film project than you would another film?
Yeah, at the time, the big influences for the piece were the Antonioni films, L'Avventura, and a lot of French cinema as well too. And we wanted to create something that felt very intimate and nostalgic, because that's what Jane is going through. She has this nostalgia of who Tayo was in the past. But we wanted to juxtapose it with what was going on currently in her life. So we shot it on Alexa LF, and then I think Sony Venice as well too. We mixed it for the modern timeline. And then for the past timeline, we shot it on Ektachrome, on 16 mil. And then in post, what we did was to give it more of a cohesive filmic look. We did a printout where we scanned on this digital onto 16 millimeter film. So yeah, we thought about it pretty intentionally, wanted to feel very intimate, but then also wanted it to wanted it to stand out. We didn't know what the other directors were doing,
right?
But I felt it was unique to shoot within those two, with those two mediums, and then also doing it 4:3, with the intention for it to stand out. So, amongst other films.
That's great. Yeah, it's absolutely, when I think back to the film, just some of the images of the beach is what pops into my head. It's it really visually striking in that segment. Well, Julian, same question for you. What were you given? What cards did you draw? And how did you choose where to go from there? Your segment is called Rose, and it's this beautiful story about a girl who's run away from her quinceañera. How did you decide on that?
So my cards, I got lucky for my story beat. I got a wild card.
Oh, nice.
So there were just a couple of wild cards that were mixed in the game. So a little freedom there for the story beat. And then my location was a neighborhood. And the place, I think I was 5th in the mix, if that's right.
That sounds about right.
And, just thinking about the other part of your question was about the format or the look or the visual language. For me and my film, Rose is sort of put into this situation where she has to live with her grandmother in like a predominantly Latino neighborhood. And it feels old to her. It feels traditional. It feels like it's something that she's moved beyond or is not a part of, right? So I chose to shoot 16 millimeter film. It was quite scary. It's been a while since I've shot that format. And, a lot of my recent work, I think, is shot digitally and felt slick in some ways. So it was a scary decision, but I think it felt very appropriate for the piece. She works through this stuff. She works through and realizes, oh, it's not old or I'm not or old-fashioned. It's just part of me. So we chose to shoot that format to communicate that idea, and even using very simple camera moves and maybe mostly the camera being static, and we wanted the story to sort of shine and show like, hey, this is the thing that she's really struggling with.
Yeah, and to follow up with that, so actually both of your segments kind of deal with cultural identity just in kind of in their own way, but in Rose, it's interesting that Jane seems to, in some ways, know more about Rose's cultural heritage. It seems like her Spanish is better and that sort of thing. How did you decide that aspect of the writing? Because it's kind of an interesting touch. She's this white woman who shows up and is like telling her about her own culture.
Yeah, it's really funny. I have a collaborator named Cole Webley that we've been working together since school. He's a director as well. He speaks Spanish, and he's a white guy with red hair. And this, as we sort of traveled together at times and worked together, we'd run into people that speak Spanish, and they would always speak Spanish to me. They'd see me, I have the dark skin, and I don't speak Spanish. My parents My parent, I'm very much like Rose. My parents faced a lot of discrimination when they were younger, and they felt at the time that a way for me to sort of escape some of that was if I didn't speak Spanish or go full in on our culture like they had. They, since then have discovered that maybe that wasn't the best choice, but things changed, the world changed. But I chose that just thinking about how that made me feel at the time. Going to someplace, somebody speaks Spanish, the white guy has to jump in and say, oh yeah, actually he doesn't speak Spanish, or he would, or it could sometimes be a joke about, here's the white guy that has he doesn't look like he would speak Spanish at all, but he speaks Spanish quite well. So, I mean, that's kind of where that stemmed from. That feeling of like, where do I belong? That's a challenging feeling that I've had most of my life, and it's really it's been very fulfilling to explore that in through this film.
Wow. That's so interesting to know that's in a way.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Obviously, that's really interesting. Well, Boma, back to you. I had a question about your segment incorporates music. Actually, a few segments in the film incorporate dance and music, but yours is one of them. And I've just looking at some of your past work, you've done music videos and worked with musicians. Was that important to you to bring that element of it into the film here?
Totally. I think music is it's probably, if not one of the most largest signifiers of culture. And I think what we're trying to showcase was how Tayo has become more in sync and more tapped into his Nigerian heritage. And the way he does that is by becoming this band leader. I mean, obviously he's very inspired by Fela Kuti and his band in that, Africa 70. And we wanted to showcase how freeing he felt when he was, listening to when his band was performing that music. And, music's really important to me as an artist and as a person. And I think that whole sequence has no real dialogue, but we get a sense of what Jane and what Tayo are experiencing. And I think music has this intangible ability to transport you into like a new realm of whatever it is, for you to have like a very unique experience. So we wanted to create something that that felt that way for the audience.
I love that. Yeah, you have these dancers there as well, and I think one of my favorite shots of the film actually is when he's kind of looking at Jane and this dancer is kind of pulling him away, but there's this kind of camera pulling back. I love that moment. One last question I think we have time for, and I want to ask you both about casting. So, Boma, how did you cast the part of Tayo? What were you looking for in that character?
Yeah, it was really important to find someone that can play, because he's playing two characters. He's playing Oliver, who hasn't really grown into himself, or hadn't really grown into himself, and was kind of awkward and shy, and really like he's suppressing who he really was. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum was someone that was very free and vulnerable, and play the polar opposites of that to really arc the character, so the audience can get a sense of that transformation. So we saw a lot of actors, and it's a really tough thing to do, because especially finding someone that could play that vulnerable aspect of him. And we ended up going with Cheeto. He played, he's the actor we cast, and he was really great. Great to work with, super friendly guy, and he had a lot going on behind the eyes, and because a lot of the film is nonverbal. So he had a lot going on with his eyes and his physicality that when we saw it in the audition Sarah Park, the producer, and I were just texting like, "Oh, I think we found the guy. We love him."
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that totally comes across. I was going to mention the physicality and like in those kind of the flashback segments, he's so kind of taut and then obviously he's much more free and fluid in dancing in the present, and yeah, it's great. Well, Julian, Daniella Hernandez plays Rose in yours, and she's also one of my favorite things in the entire film project. She's a really wonderful performer. What were you looking for in that character, and how did you cast Daniella?
Yeah, she was so good, right? I mean, I was blown away and really at ease on set. It was so easy to work. Her and Gillian really worked well together, and were partners in this. I mean, and really the actors partnering with me. Our process at first was, we thought, well, maybe we can find somebody who's been doing something. Maybe it's a Disney show or some other film. And there were a few people that we heard from. Some people passed, and there was one in particular. I remember she did a great job, and she auditioned for us. She's been doing some recognizable work, and Danny, this was like one of her first things actually, and I went through all the tapes. I made decisions like 10 times probably, and when we came down to it, I just felt like not only was Danny's performance right, but her look was right. I mean, I very much dove into this on a personal level, and I think that if we took a family photo and it was like me and my three sisters standing next to me and added Danny in, people might believe that she was part of my family. She looks like my sister. She looked like she could be my sister, and it really took me to a place where I can access that sort of emotional, those emotional points, and also, bring out like those sort of feelings that I felt at that time, and how we can portray that on camera. So really, a lot of it was her performance, but her look too. Like, it was so believable. Yeah. It really was. I mean, also, growing up, I was in many quinceañeras, which I hated. My mom, it was always my mom's friend or my aunt's friend from church or something, and I had to go there and dance to this music in Spanish. There's like this waltz that you do with a bunch of strangers, and I hated it. And I wanted to access those feelings and find something that was familiar to me.
That is so fascinating. Yeah, that part really came out so wonderfully, and really the entire film. Thank you both so much for your work on this. Thank you for your time today. I think we're all out of time at this point, but it's such an interesting film, and so glad to get to pick your brains about it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.